Hey everybody, today we're going to take a look at the Marvel Legends Spider-Man No Way Home 3-pack of Tom, Tobey, and Andrew Spider-Man. As usual, please like, share, comment, subscribe, or even hit that super thanks button. I do appreciate all engagement on my channel. And also shout out to my neighborhood-friendly collector store, Robo, for getting this in early. So now we have a quick look at the box. Up front we have all three Spideys, the Spider-Man No Way Home branding logo over here. At the top, we see that Spider-Man logo. Down to the bottom, some product information and a notice about the all-paper, no plastic packaging. Down the side of the box, we see all three Spider-Man in that iconic scene fighting off the couple of villains like Electro. Back of the box, we have renders of the three figures and all the accessories, like the interchangeable hands and the web effects that come along. Some more product information at the bottom. And finally, on that last side of the box, all three of them are jumping into battle in that same movie scene. So let's go ahead and get this box set open. Out of the packaging, all figures are packed in this cardboard insert. Accessories all come stored at the top, and the three Spider-Man are stored over here. Now freeing all three figures up on the left. First up we have, and this is Tobey Spider-Man. On the middle we have Tom Holland Spider-Man. And lastly, getting this one out of the bag, and this is Andrew Spider-Man. So Tom Holland Spider-Man comes with two other whipping hands and two fists. These two hands are cast in a dark blue plastic with red paint for his fingers. The sculpt has those web lines, however those web lines are not drawn in or painted in. Both alternate hands articulate inwards and outwards. And Tobey Spider-Man comes with two whipping hands and also two hands that look kind of splayed or relaxed in a sort of wall crawling stance. All his hands are cast in a red plastic with silver paint for the web lines. You will also notice texture on his gloves to really show off that high-tech material used for his spider suit. The silver paint for the web lines are applied really sharp, fantastic work, and it's really impressive. And just like Tom's hands, these alternate hands are also articulated inwards as well as outwards. And finally, Andrew Spidey comes with two alternate whip hands, one left fist, and one right splayed or wall crawling hand. The plastic used for Andrew's suit is a more metallic, shiny red plastic, so you can see how the light kind of bounces off these two hands. There's also a texture to these hands. It's a little more subtle, while the web lines are also really sharp, well sculpted. They show off quite well on these hands, and the paint is also applied with laser precision, really accurate to how the web lines are sculpted to the hands. So that's fantastic work on the sculpting and the paint work. You will also notice the activator for his webs on the insides of his palms. The hands are articulated inwards and outwards. And lastly, in this long, slim paper baggie, we have the three web slinging accessories. These are cast in a transparent plastic. No color added to them, and we've seen this sculpt before. It's curled on one end with the twine of the web all the way down the sculpt, and finally at the end there's a loop. And here we have Tom Holland Spider-Man with his whip hand and his alternate fist, also having that web effect slipped onto his arm. So we get pretty typical alternate hands with the Spideys. I'm definitely least impressed by the web effect, because it's really not useful. The alternate hands pop onto the Spideys just fine. Over here we have Tobey working with his alternate wall crawling hands and his whip hands. And of course I'm holding up this web accessory because it's just really too soft to even hold up its own weight. And because all these Spideys don't come with gripping hands, you're more or less limited to using that loop and using that to slip onto their arms. And finally here we have Andrew Spider-Man with his wall crawling hands and his whip hand. They do pop onto the figure just fine, so you have a couple of options with playing and displaying him. So what's really missing in terms of accessories for this set is three unmasked heads for the three Spider-Man. But hey, we know Hasbro's gotta make use of these molds once again, and they're probably gonna re-release these bodies with those unmasked heads. But at the increased price point of this set, despite having the new bodies, I think we definitely should have gotten some unmasked heads. Now we're having a look at the sculpt and paint of these three figures. Tom, of course, is the youngest of them all. He's the shortest and the most stocky built, and also definitely appearing the most muscular of the three figures. Tobey over here is more advanced in his years, so he's slightly more heavy set in his midsection as well as his thigh area. And finally we have Andrew, who is the tallest and the most slender in terms of build. All three Spideys also have quite distinct color tones. Tom has that really dark blue with the flat bright red and hits of gold accents all over the figure. For his head sculpt, he's got also really distinct black outline around his eyes. For Tobey over here, the red is lighter and he's got a deeper blue. I might be wrong, but the blue looks a little too deep. It might have been a little more muted in the movies. And he's also got that very distinct silver web lines. And finally we have Andrew over here. He's got a nice metallic red for the plastic that gives off a nice shine, but also having that muted blue, giving a good contrast to the rest of his suit. The only criticism I have in terms of proportions is on Andrew Spidey because his feet just look a little too small, especially when it's compared to the other two figures. I also think Tom's suit is inaccurate because he's not supposed to have those two wrist gauntlets, so Hasbro's kind of dropped the ball a little over here. Sculpt-wise, I do think Tom Spider-Man is a straight-up reuse. I still really like that head sculpt, and generally also that nice texture all over his suit. While there's black and white paint for his eyes, that's applied really sharply, he's now got that web lines finally painted in. The web lines are painted in using a dark grey paint, very sharp all over and stays within those web lines sculpt. The rest of his torso is cast in that red plastic, and the dark blue paint and gold accents for the spider logo really stands out against that red plastic. The red paint for the line accents down the sides are also really distinct and eye-catching. Good work over here for his shoulder joint, where you see all those same paint applications leading onto his arms, really sharply and nicely applied. However, that red paint on the top of his shoulder looks to be applied a little too thin, and you can see the different tones between the red plastic on his torso and the red paint on the top of his shoulder. Moving down his arms, we have more sharp paint applications of red. And on that inaccurate golden wrist gauntlet, he's got a hit of white and blue paint to show how that spot kind of glows. Rather disappointingly, the web lines are not drawn in on his hands. So that kind of sticks out to me and is quite distracting when you see how it contrasts with the web lines on the rest of his body. And just to show you that you can actually pop up those golden gauntlets around his wrists, however you do see a little bit of that skinny weird peg design. And it definitely looks weird even when you pop on his hands. On the back of the figure, once again also very nicely and sharply applied paint applications for the line work. On his thighs, there's a bit of texture and line work sculpted in as well. And I also like how the paint applications are done on his boots. Once again with the golds, the reds, and the dark grey web line. They kind of messed up a little bit on the web line on his foot, but I suppose that's simple enough for me to paint and draw in myself. So while the paintwork on this Tom Holland Spider-Man looks really good and sharp, I actually think this should be the normal standard of Hasbro figures. So I do like the sculpt and the paintwork, but I won't say that I'm particularly impressed by this figure. Now we go on to Tobey, and he's covered in that texture that I described when looking at his hands. He's got a very distinct and rough fabric texture, kind of really implying that high-tech material use for his suit. The texture is different on the red parts compared to the parts in blue. I do like that head sculpt. It's very distinct and super eye-catching, with a grey outline around the white for his eyes, and that very nice, sharply applied silver paint for the web lines all over his head and the rest of his body. The silver line work is fantastic, and that's impressive for me. What's even more impressive is the really sharp and distinct spider logo on the middle, no bleeding whatsoever, and also once again looks really amazing. The web line work also follows all the way into the shoulder joint and also forms a very nice and distinct separation between the red and the blue parts of his suit. We go on to his arms, and he's got blue paint on the inside, very nice separation between the reds and the blues once again. I like how that blue paint lines up perfectly with that elbow joint. However, that elbow joint does come across a little distracting because it doesn't have any of that texture and silver web lines along with the rest of his arm. On the back of the figure, we also have that really nice and distinct spider logo spread out across. Once again, no bleed in any of that red paint applications. However, I will say that the red isn't applied as thickly enough on the top, so there's a different tone of how the top part of the spider looks compared to the bottom. And we have this Tobey looking a little more heavy set in the middle, and having this shape of the figure Hasbro has absolutely nailed how his belt looks, because having this wide band belt kind of draws your eyes towards this part of the body. So in that regard, the paint applications on that belt section must be close to perfect, and I'm happy to say that over here Hasbro has done it fantastically. And on closer inspection I realized that I've got a QC error. It looks like my Tobey Spider-Man over here has a left shoulder, but because of how the paint applications for the web lines are applied, it really looks like a regular right shoulder. But once you see that the silver web lines don't match up with the sculpt, I think this is where I've got a problem. I've actually got two left shoulder pieces, and this left shoulder piece is now assembled on the right arm. So this is really quite a bummer. Even at this elevated price point, we still see the same QC failings from Hasbro. Going down to the rest of his legs, it's the same bare blue plastic, no paint applications until you hit his feet. His feet are a separate red plastic that's attached at his calves, with also that really nice silver paint for the web line work, looking fantastic even round to the back of the figure. So Tobey Spider-Man is really a dose of nostalgia enhanced with modern sculpting, molding and painting techniques for a really impressive Tobey Spider-Man. And finally we have Andrew Spider-Man with those really big and expressive Spider-Man eyes, once again also painted in white and black. I will point out that the black line work isn't so great on the middle of those eyes, so I might have to paint or draw in the rest of the black outline. I will still say the black paint for the web line work on all over the entire figure is really nice. Very sharp, well executed and no bleed. The black lines also contrast really nicely on the metallic red plastic, so the line work really stands out and looks fantastic. Hasbro also has nailed that Spider logo down the middle of his torso. Very sharply sculpted and painted. You can even see the two fangs on the middle. And there's really no complaints with any of that paint bleeding out at all. The same line work is also present on his belt, as well as impressively within his shoulder joint. The rest of his arms are also that metallic red plastic, blue paint for those panels on his arms, and once again, really sharp black web line work. The line work does get a little messy when it comes close to the joint, and the mid-elbow joint is a blue plastic instead of red, and the red paint on that lower part of the mid-elbow joint is also not applied thickly enough. So it kind of distracts you when you're looking at the various unintended tones of red on his arm. We go on to the back of the figure. Once again, the red Spider-Man logo is almost impeccably executed again. Very sharp and no bleeding. And I do also want to point out a little bit of that extra detail with the web shooter sculpted on the insides of his lower forearms. So that's a very nice detail on both his arms. And just like Tobey, the rest of his legs are a blue plastic with the red plastic attached for his boot portion. So it's very clean separation between the blues and the reds. And also near perfect black web line work on the rest of his boots. And just like Tobey, I really like how Andrew's Spider-Man is executed. The distinct and expressive eyes, along with the more muted tones, and the extremely sharp work for the Spider-Man logo also sets this figure apart in terms of how sharp he looks. For articulation, Tom has got a double ball dumbbell joint in his neck, so he looks up that much as well as down. He also gets some sideways tilting, and you can also go 360. He's got butterfly joints at his shoulders, so he pulls his arms forward that much and backward just that far. Swivel hinge at the shoulders that go 360 and do come out just below 90 degrees. Swivel at the bicep for 360 spin. Double hinged, elbows with the pins concealed for very good range. And swivel hinge at the wrist for 360 spin, articulating in and out. He's got a mid-torso ab crunch, bending forward that far as well as backward. Swivel at the waist for 360 spin. Ball joints at the hips that go out quite a good bit sideways, and no problems forward and backward. Thigh swivel for 360 spin. Double hinged knees with the pins concealed, so he's got quite good range. And on the ankles, hinged upwards and downwards, and pivoting outwards as well as inwards. Tobey has got double ball dumbbell joints at the necks as well, so he gets to tilt his head sideways and going all the way 360, and also looking down just that bit and up about that much. He's also got butterfly joints at his shoulders, so he brings them a good deal forward and just a little bit backwards. Swivel and a hinge at the shoulders, so it goes 360 but also comes out quite an impressive range. Swivel at the bicep for 360 spin. Double hinge elbows with the pins concealed for very good range. However, I do want to point out that middle red elbow joint does tend to look a little distracting from the side because it's not painted on the inside and does stick out above the rest of his arm. Swivel hinge at the wrist for 360 spin, articulating in and out. At his mid-torso section, we see that new engineering with the ball joint in the middle and the hinge below, so he can spin 360, but you have to take note that middle ball joint feels a little gummy, and just take care when you articulate it. That ball joint also lets you get sideways tilting, and combining that ball joint together with that hinge gives you quite good forward bend as well as backward bend. And this is where the sculpt breaks up a little bit and you can kind of peek into that ball joint. He's got ball joints at the hips that do drop down a little bit. However, that split isn't fantastic sideways, probably limited by the range of the ball joint itself and not because of that drop down hinge. You can also get forward and backward that much. He's got thigh swivel for a 360 spin. I will say the joints on his legs feel a little stiff from the thigh swivel downwards. And over here you have a double hinged knee with the pins concealed for very good range. And on his ankles he's got very good range of tilt upwards and downwards. And finally ankle pivot that goes outwards and inwards. And finally we're having a look at Andrew. He's got double ball dumbbell hinge for that neck joint as well, so you get sideways tilt. You also get 360 spin, and he can look down that much as well as up. He's also got the butterfly joints at the shoulders, so he brings his arms forward as well as backward that much. Swivel hinge at the shoulder for a 360 spin, and also going out an impressive range. Swivel at the bicep for 360 spin, and double hinged elbows with concealed pins for very good range. Swivel and hinge at the wrist for 360 spin, articulating in and out. Mid-torso ball joint that lets you spin him 360, and once again that middle ball joint is quite gummy, so you have to take care when you swivel him around. You do get a little bit of range, tilting sideways as well. And when you combine that ball joint together with that hinge at his waist, he does bend forward quite a good bit and also backward quite impressively, just like Tobey. And you can once again also see that ball joint in the gap of the torso. He also has ball joint hips that do drop down, and the split that you get is much better with Andrew. You also get quite good range forward and backward. There's a thigh swivel for 360 spin. Once again, these joints on his legs also do feel tougher and stiffer with that double hinge pinless knees as well. And on his ankles, he's got tilt that goes upward that much and downward, and pivot that goes outward and inward. Perhaps he's on an older body, and that's why I think that Tom Spider-Man doesn't go into deeper crouching stances as well. But still, for all mid-air poses, I think he still poses just fine, looking quite nice. I do love how Hasbro has given different sculpts for the two wall crawling hands on Tobey, so you can see how different they are in terms of how their fingers are curled. And he definitely looks fantastic in a wall crawling pose, just like in that very iconic first Spider-Man movie poster. And it really is an excellent dose of nostalgia to be able to get Tobey Spider-Man into his mid-air poses with that iconic costume on modern engineering. Compared with the other two Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man does feel better to pose. However, just like the other two, he has quite limited neck range, and that affects how far you can get the figure to look upwards. And because of his lankier proportions, I do think Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man looks much better in his mid-air poses. Kind of feeling closer to what a comic Spider-Man should feel and pose like. And to be honest, for the price of this set, I think we should have gotten a couple of pointing hands, but I guess the twip hands can be fudged into those pointing hands. And of course, with newly engineered Spider-Man, there must be a 4-point crouch challenge. So just looking at the 3 Spider-Man, surprisingly Tom and Tobey could pull it off. But Andrew over here, I really struggled with him. I couldn't get him to balance in his 4-point crouch, and hence he's on a flight stand to help him into that 4-point crouch. However, I think all 3 of them don't have enough range looking upward to make this pose look awesome. So now I'm going to show you a quick mod to get more upward range out of the neck joint. This is Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I popped his head off and also sliced that much plastic off that neck ball joint. As you can see over here, I freed up more range, but I've only removed plastic within the joint and not sacrificed any of that sculpt at all. And over here also doing the same for Tobey's Spider-Man, shaving just that much plastic within the joint and not outside of it so I don't screw up any of that web lining. And finally also removing plastic on the inside of the joint from Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, just that much plastic, also allowing more upward range in the neck. So now with that minor easy neck mod, all 3 Spider-Man can be looking at you when they're doing their 4-point crouch. For size, Tobey Spider-Man stands at just over 6 inches and that's over 15 centimeters. Tom Holland Spider-Man stands at about 5 3/4 of an inch and that's about 14.5 centimeters. And Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man stands at about almost 6 1/4 inches and that's almost 16 centimeters. Now putting them alongside 2 of the best comic book Marvel Legends Spider-Man released so far, with the Amazing Friends Spider-Man and the Renew Your World Spider-Man. And here they are with the Symbiote Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2099, which is on the Pizza Spider-Man body. And I'd just like to point out how similar the proportions are on these 2 bodies, but Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man definitely feels like a much more better engineered figure. And here they are with Green Goblin and Electro, and with Venom and Carnage. And here they are with Iron Man and Captain America. For comparisons with other lines, here they are with some G.I. Joe Classified series and some Star Wars Black series. The obvious negatives for this set are typical Hasbro issues. First, there's the increased price point pushing this to import figure range, yet we still see a rehashed Tom Holland Spidey figure. I'd have liked to see unmasked heads and maybe pointing hands to reenact the Spider-Man meme scene. It's a big bummer to me that my copy of Tobey has 2 left shoulders as well. But what stands out is very well engineered and painted figures for the Tobey and Andrew Spideys. Both figures feel fun to pose in hand and show off just how far Marvel Legends has come. I'd still recommend this set to big Spider-Man fans, but on a personal note, I'm definitely disappointed with my QC issue. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, subscribe to my channel, or even hit the super thanks button. Thanks for watching, take care and stay safe.